Well, by now you certainly are sitting comfortably. So, you certainly are sitting comfortably. So I'll begin. Yeah, rewriting your talk at less than 48 hours' notice is a little challenging. There is a story about an Oxford University student doing an exam in theology, and he was totally unprepared and had done no work. And he, first question said, analyze the Roman Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation. And he wrote, far be it from me to enlighten the examiners on the topic of transubstantiation, but here is a list in chronological order of the kings of Judah. My wife and I were at a concert a few years ago in the Barbican when, and this is why we have a substitute singer, Dana Damrat was supposed to be singing, I think, the 4 last songs of Richard Strauss. And Nozedo, the conductor, turned to the audience and said, let me tell you about the life of a musician. Our singer arrived from New York today, but her voice did not. So instead, the leader of our orchestra, that's Roman Simovic, will play the Tchaikovsky violin concerto on no rehearsal at all, and at about 10 minutes' notice. The audience loved it, we loved it. It was a stunning performance. He played it impeccably. He'd been playing it since he was 5 years old, so that was fine. But the audience loved the substitution. And of course, as you know, but I should say that Sarah Connolly is quite seriously unwell, and we are very grateful indeed to Eilish Tynan for jumping in at such short notice. And this is particularly important because this concert was designed partly with Kathleen's collaboration in choosing the programme, because Kathleen leaves the board of Leeds Leader at this point, as I do actually. We've both been there for 12 years and our time is up. The guys calling from the side of the pond, come in number 1, your time is up. I've luckily, Eilish is singing L'Invitation au Voyage. L'Invitation au Voyage is one of Duparc's most well-known songs. He did actually only write about, well, certainly less than 20, I can't remember the exact number, but he set a poem by Charles Baudelaire. And since I don't have a piano, I will be talking about literature quite a lot just now. This poem of Baudelaire's is a very seductive poem. He is asking his lover to give way to the decadent life. Duparc actually skips the second verse of this poem. There are 3 verses. The second stanza tries to seduce the lady by stressing how beautiful the furniture is in the house that he lives in. And it has beautiful perfume as well. And it's full of la splendeur orientale, which is a big deal for fin de siècle of France. Orientalism, Katie was talking about this the other day. But he leaves that one out. I think the furniture is a little bit too prosaic compared to the rest of it. Baudelaire's poem then is very it's decadent, it's emotional, it's exotic, that's the word, particularly. But it is not a mess. If someone like Walt Whitman had written this poem, it would be 10 times longer. Every line would be about 20 words long, and you could guess how it would be divided up on the page. It would be wonderful, but it would be different, and it wouldn't be possible to set it to music. Baudelaire writes a poem with a very tight rhyme scheme, which you will hear the way Duparc sets the poem. He doesn't gloss over these things. So if you did this sort of stuff at school, forgive me. But so the rhyme scheme goes AAB, CCB, DDE, FFE. So some rhymes recur, others are just in couplets. But the whole thing is very carefully organized. The lengths of the line are very consistent. And in general, it's a very disciplined effort at seduction. Of the woman called Mon enfant, ma sœur. She is not his child. She is not his sister. No, she is a grown-up, okay? I need to make that very clear because it puzzles some people. It's just terms of affection, okay? I would not use them myself, but that was then. Baudelaire also, even more seductively, wrote another poem called Harmonie du Soir, and that has an even more intricate rhyme scheme and an even more stable length of line. Every line is a hexameter with what we call 6 feet in English. There are only basically 2 rhymes in the entire poem of 16 lines, and some whole lines reappear according to a very tight pattern from stanza to stanza. So that's another exotic poem describing the scent of the evening and the violin crying out like an afflicted heart and all that kind of thing, but very organized. And Duparc is also very organized, but before I come to Duparc and try to describe in words alone certain technicalities of the music, I'm going to present you with an alternative English translation of L'Invitation au Voyage, which I discovered from an American poet published in 1952. I won't name the poet because I think it's too embarrassing. So the poem begins, Mon enfant, ma sœur, sont jaloux de sœurs, d'aller là-bas vivre ensemble, aimer à loisir, aimer et mourir, au pays que te ressemble. Well, here we go. My daughter, my sister, consider the vista of living out there, you and I. To love at our leisure, then ending our pleasure in climes you resemble to die. Now, he's got the rhyme scheme absolutely perfect. He's got the length of the lines perfect. There is nothing wrong with that at all. Technically, I think it's amazing. But he lost me at the second line with that shocking rhyme, sister and vista. It goes on. I don't want to embarrass the person, even if he's watching over me now. Now, one of the most striking things about Duparc's setting of this poem is it is also very disciplined, but in a very different way. So, on the one hand, well, actually, on the left hand, the piano, you have a pedal note repeated almost consistently throughout the entire song. So that's quite organized. And against that, you have various harmonies which are all based on the same chord. And if there's one thing I want you to remember when you go home tonight after the concert, I want animated conversations about Duparc's use of the French sixth chord. The French sixth chord is a particular variety of an augmented sixth, and it is constructed with 2 interlocking tritones. You really don't need to remember that. But the point is that that chord can be resolved in a number of different directions. Rather like Donald Tovey said of the diminished seventh, he said that chord was the Clapham junction of music, that chord that could be modified so that it would take you in any direction. French sixth works a bit like that. And it seems like a wash of sensual sound, but underneath the surface, it's actually highly organized. Different way from Baudelaire, but still organized. And there's a refrain as well, the famous refrain, La, tout n'accorde et beauté, luxe, calme et volupté. Luxury, peace, and, well, voluptuousness. And that refrain, that 2-line refrain, recurs at the end of each stanza and at the end of the whole poem. And that is set a little bit like recitative. The piano plays long arpeggiated chords and the singer sings, and then another long chord and the singer sings. So there's still a form there, even if it's flexible. And a tune comes back. We always like this in music analysis, when a tune comes back. That's all Wagner, by the way. So there's a musical phrase at aimer et loisir, Pom, 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 pom. That phrase comes back in the piano part underneath a different line in the voice in the second stanza. And underneath the very last refrain, it also comes back, but this time separated into two phrases with a little bit of time in between them. So that's really quite a clever way of just adding an element that comes back and holds the song together. So it's a piece of decadent sensual indulgence from the fin de siècle, but highly organized at the same time. So there's something for everyone. Now I'm going to turn to our Chloris. I think this is probably one of the most popular melodies in French song. It is sung, everyone has recorded it. Every voice type, high, low, male, female, everyone does it. When Reynaldo Hahn was alive, it was not recorded by anyone. They preferred Si j'avais les ailes, and that was recorded a load of times. But this one, not. I have no idea why, and I spent quite a lot of time yesterday trying to find out. I was sure someone must have done it, but the first Reynaldo Hahn song was recorded in 1900, right at the beginning of, well, that's not quite true, but very close to the beginning of the recording period, on a flat disc. But that wasn't our Chloris. I'm going to talk to you about the poet who wrote the poem, because everyone goes on about the song. The poem was written in the early 17th century by the French poet Théophile de Viau. He was a very interesting person. He was born somewhere between Bordeaux and Toulouse in the Loire-Garonne region to a Huguenot family, son of a lawyer. He joined a traveling theatre. Then he became a court poet in 1615, and then he converted to Roman Catholicism, which was a very good idea at that time because the Huguenots were being persecuted. But he remained, as they called him, a libertine. Yes, I sense your shock. A French poet, a libertine, good Lord. He was banished from France in 1619, accused of irreligion and of having unworthy morals. Hard to imagine. You wonder why they picked on him. He published what were widely seen as licentious poems in 1622. The Jesuits denounced him as bisexual. He was condemned to be burned alive outside Notre Dame, but he escaped. So they burned an effigy of him instead. He tried to get to England. They caught him. He was in prison for 2 years while, and I promise I'm not making this up, a monk spent 2 years going through all his poetry to find out if any of the poems described what I can only call homosexual acts. He failed, but it was very controversial. There were pamphlets, dozens of pamphlets written on both sides, some supporting Viau, some saying, no, he's a horrible person. But in the end, the death sentence was commuted to exile. I think exile from Paris, anywhere except here. And he died he was looked after in the castle of Chantilly. He actually died in Paris. I'm not quite sure he managed that. In 1626, he died, and a parish priest wrote to one of the other French writers of the time, a man called Garas, who opposed Viau vehemently. This parish priest wrote to him in Latin. He said, Theophilus, ut vixit, ita mortuus est, sine sensu religiones et pietatis. Theophilus died as he lived, without a sense of religion or piety. So he made a big impression at that time. basically, he was quite well known as a poet, and he wrote a play, Pyramus and Thisbe. He wrote a lot of poetry in different genres, sonnets, all that kind of thing. He also wrote a translation of Plato, and he wrote a fragment of a comic story. But with his death, no one was interested anymore, and he disappeared completely from the French literary scene. No one was reading him for practically 200 years. We had Corneille, we had Molière, we had Racine. So did we really need this rather obscure guy from the court of Louis XIII? No, we didn't. But in the 19th century, Théophile again, Gautier, rediscovered him and included him in a book called Grotesque, where he tried to rehabilitate medieval and 16th century poetry, which was unfashionable at the time. And he wrote a whole chapter about Théophile de Viau. And after that, people wrote more about him. And there was quite a lot of interest and some more scholarly activity. So that by the time Reynaldo Hahn set his poem, he was a bit obscure, but he wasn't completely unknown. He wrote a very interesting declaration about how you should write. He says, "The discourse must be firm, its meaning easy, the language expressive and meaningful. Affectations are only weakness and artifice. These thefts, called imitations of ancient authors," which a lot of people were keen on in France then, "should be called ornaments that are not in our style. We must write in the modern style. Demosthenes and Virgil did not write in our time, and we could not write in theirs." That's a direct argument that you hear with historically performed music. What would Bach do if he had a Wurlitzer organ? That kind of thing. What would Berlioz do if he had tuned percussion that you could play glissandi on? We have no idea. It's a meaningless question. They didn't have them. But that topic was raised even in the early 17th century in France. We can't write like Virgil, and we shouldn't try. Now, in 1897, someone wrote, "His libertine and unrestrained life was a succession of misfortunes, brief bouts of drunkenness and persecutions." Think about that when you hear this exquisite song. Because Reynaldo Hahn was actually quite a conservative, classically minded composer. He was not a rhapsodist. He didn't write anything like Duparc. He didn't even write like Ravel, and he could be very economical when he chose. And there are some musical features of our Clarice that I just want to stress, even though they may seem quite obvious to you. The song opens with two things that happen, both from the 18th century. The bass line and the piano goes pom, 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 pom. That's exactly Bach's air on the G string, bar one. After that it's different, but it keeps the same style in octaves. That's how late 19th century people thought Baroque piano parts should be played. They always have octaves in the left hand. Yeah. Anyone who's played Alfred Moffat's arrangements of violin pieces, you know, this stuff. That's the first thing. And in the right hand, we have an ornament that Couperin would have easily recognized. They go, pididum, pididum. So we're back in old music. It's not specifically the 17th century. It's certainly not Viau's time. But in those days, actually, people didn't discriminate nearly as much as we do. So they just talked about old music. That's anything pre-1800 is called old. And there are two signs of that old music. There are other things as well. You don't see this, but you don't hear this, I mean, but it's written on a time signature of 4/2. That's a time signature you associate with old religious music. It's almost unknown in the 20th century. We all understand it, it's not a problem, but it's very unusual. And it's marked très long. So you've got a time signature where basically all the notes look long, except the pilidum. Everything else looks long, and you're told to play slowly. I just mentioned that. I'm always interested what speed people play this at. And of course, it is entirely up to the singer. So, you know, I don't want anyone to die of lack of breath just because they're trying to sing too slowly. But it's quite important. There's also a marking near the end, only near the end, avec expression. That does not mean that you don't sing with expression the rest of the time. It just means that it's particularly important here, which is actually the last thing the singer says. I know you, ladies and gentlemen, are far too sensible to make that sort of ridiculous point. But believe me, I have had conversations with serious professional Baroque musicians who say, oh, if it says avec expression here, it must mean there's no expression the rest of the time. And they're not stupid people either, just to be clear. But it does happen. I actually published on that a few years ago, and it is now regularly quoted. It's my contribution to the debate. So, A Chloris is a wonderful evocation of a lost past, certainly lost in 1916, if you think about France in that year. It's an evocation of an old culture, with a poem written by one of the most decadent and corrupted individuals of the time, if you believe what they said about him. Now, I'm going to finish because I have decided to indulge myself and I'm on time. Quite a few of the songs that Eilish is singing are Irish. There's a song by James Joyce. He didn't write the whole song. He wrote the words, and he wrote the tune, or rather he made it up himself. He was musical. He played the piano, he sang, he communicated with Arnold Dolmetsch about Dolmetsch making him, I think, a harpsichord. He was very musically literate, but he didn't actually write music. So he wrote this tune, and adieu. By the way, in my program, I have to point out that Joyce himself pronounced the word adieu, 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 very ooh, yeah? And there's a note in the music to say that's how you're meant to pronounce it. Something else for you to talk about on the journey home. The other Irish tunes in this program, near the end of the program, are by a close friend of Joyce who was a composer and stayed in touch with him for almost all his life. And Joyce was very keen on music. And so I'm going to indulge myself because this is the last talk I give as a trustee of Leeds Leader. And I'm going to read you a bit of James Joyce himself. In his collection Dubliners, the last story is called The Dead. It's the longest short story he wrote. It's over 15,000 words. And it's one of T.S. Eliot said it was the finest short story in the English language. And just to briefly set the scene, the story is about Gabriel Conroy. He's a teacher, part-time reviewer. He's quite pleased with himself, but he also has worries. He has relationships with his family and friends that are complicated. And the scene is a Christmas party in a Dublin house. There's music, waltzing, quadrilles, and dancing, and conversations about music. They talk about how maybe opera singers were better in the old days. And someone else says, oh, I think Caruso is really good. Oh, really? You know, that kind of thing. Conversations like that happen now all the time. There's going to be snow all over Ireland. They're a little concerned about this, about getting home. Gabriel thinks about the snow quite a bit. At the party, they hear an Irish singer sing a folk song, The Lass of Ochrim. And then Gabriel and his wife Greta leave and go to their hotel. And Gabriel is expecting that they will have quite a lot of fun in this hotel, and he's kind of looking forward to it because they haven't had a night in a hotel for a long time. It doesn't turn out like that. In the hotel, Greta, dear, what are you thinking about? She did not answer at once, and then said in an outburst of tears, oh, I'm thinking about that song, The Lass of Ochrim. She broke loose from him and ran to the bed, threw her arms round the bed rail and hid her face. Gabriel stood still for a moment and then followed her. What about the song? What makes you cry? I was thinking about a person a long time ago. And who was that person? A person I used to know in Galway when I lived with my grandmother. And she's already said she'd like to go back to Galway sometime. Someone you were in love with? He asked ironically. It was a young boy I used to know named Michael Fury. He used to sing that song, The Lass of Aughrim. He was very delicate. And she explains that Michael Fury died standing in the rain all night outside her house for love of her. And he realizes he doesn't know his wife at all and hasn't known all sorts of things about her for years. And then he thinks about on a wider scale, and Joyce takes over in the final paragraph. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey westward. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen, and farther westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling, too, upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead. And I think that paragraph shows that Joyce knew perfectly well how to write music. The falling snow is almost a Wagnerian leitmotif through the entire story. So thank you very much indeed for indulging me, and I know you will enjoy the most wonderful performance from Eilish Tynan, who never ceases to delight audiences whenever she comes to Leeds. Thank you very much.